The next thing I'm going to do is make this cut on this one. This is going to be the piece that has the snap. So I'm going to take this and kind of line it up where it's going to go eventually and mark it with pencil and cut along that line. And that will be the place where the knife sticks up so you can grab it to pull it out of the case. Leather's pretty tough, especially after it's been wet and then re-dried and hardened. I'm going to do this next. They'll just follow the line. And I'm just cutting this with an X-Acto knife. Okay.
Okay.
Next thing I'm going to do is mold this. These are a little bit long yet, but I found that they shrink some, so I don't want to cut it too soon. I want to end up cutting it, shaving it down to the exact size when it folds over, and it will end up folding over like this one and being stitched on the side on both sides. So I'm going to get it wet so that I can mold it into shape. That's fairly close to the right shape. I'll just let that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pattern on this to put some decorations on it. And what I decided to do was use this stamp to make a pattern that looks something like that. And it'll follow this curvature. I'm going to dampen it. And then I'm going to back it up. I've got a piece of railroad here I'm going to stick underneath it to give me something hard to back it up, but I can't get into this little corner, so I'm just going to stick a little piece of metal in there to begin with to get us started off in this very corner here. That's not going to work. Okay, there's the outer one. That was tougher than I expected. I'm going to go ahead and put the inner one. I'll see if I can do it on this time. Since it's farther in from that edge, it might work. I'm going ahead and putting the pattern all the way up here, even though it's going to be covered up. That way it just disappears underneath this snap cover. Okay. So I'll let that dry. Let this dry. Probably the next thing I'll end up doing is staining this or dyeing it. And I may end up going ahead and dyeing this. I'm going to have to dye the leather before I stitch it because I want the stitching to stand out as a separate color. So you have to dye it first, otherwise I would dye the stitching as well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dye these two pieces. You probably can't tell it on camera, but there's a subtle difference between this shade and this shade. This is actually black and this is brown. I'm going to use Phoebing's. It's a solvent dye. The reason I like this is it penetrates real well into the leather, so even if you get it scuffed, it's going to still look that color down in the leather ways. I'm going to use what's called light brown on here, and it will look brown. And the second step after dyeing it and after it dries is to put on this satin sheen. This is EcoFlow satin sheen, and it seals the dye in. Otherwise, the dye, you could still rub it off on your clothes or something. So it kind of seals it inside and makes it a nice even appearance. But on the brown, it tends to darken the brown. So it'll look lighter at first. When I put the satin sheen on there, it will look a little darker. So So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to dye this piece. And I'm using a little wool dauber. This one's well used. And I normally go over everywhere a couple times because you may miss a spot, or it may be lighter in a spot and you don't realize it. So I kind of rub over it multiple times. Oh, and you can see I've got gloves on. This will stain your hands, or anything else it touches for that matter. I'm going to stain all the edges. The back side of this will not be seen. It will be actually glued onto the outer case. So I'm not going to stain that, so I got a better glue adhesion. It's kind of rough on the inner surface also, which will help the glue adhere. Okay, that piece is done. Now for the brown. After I'm done with these, I put these bottles back in like a plastic sandwich bag because the lids don't seal all that well. I've put a gasket in there myself, but I don't want it spilling on other things. The brown is more apparent that you need more than one coat to get it brown. Another reason for going over it multiple times, it gives a more even appearance to the color. Okay. So on this, the knife is going to end up going in here, so it's actually going to be open from the top. You're going to be able to see inside, so I'm going to stain the back side of this as well. And this will get a coat of the satin sheen after it's dry as well, and I'll rub it with a wooden stick that tends to burnish it, and it'll make it smoother inside. I'm not going to worry about getting it on this area. This area is actually going to be glued. That's pretty good. So now when you look down inside it, it'll look brown on the inside as well. Looks pretty good. As this dries, it'll lighten up a little bit. So that's done. All I have to do is wait for it to dry now. So that'll probably be overnight. I'm not going to do any more tonight.